Hello, my name is Ian Viabout, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I am joined by Gavin Wallace-Ailsworth, drummer extraordinaire of the band Bent Knee. How you doing, Gavin?
Hey, Ian. Not too bad. How about you?
Good. And once again, thanks for agreeing to join me for this. This is something that we did a lot back in the radio show days, but This will be the first time doing it like with YouTube involved and Skype and face-to-face and all that stuff. So you guys have a new record out. It's called 20 Pills Without Water. And I can't see myself, so I don't. Oh, there it is.
There you go. There's
the album cover there. And first off, I just want to congratulate you and the other members of Bent Knee, because the elephant in the room here is that you lost two really important members going into this record. And I'm sure that there was, maybe not from you guys, of course, but I'm sure that some of the fans were like, ooh, is this it? You know, is this over? And kind of in the same way that maybe Genesis, when they lost some core members. But I'm happy to report that what I hear in this record, that to bring that Genesis comparison along a little further, I almost hear this as your "And Then There Were Three," because that record to me was a distillation of the Genesis sound down to its core elements. And I kind of hear that with this record as well. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, thank you for enjoying the album and saying that. But yeah, I mean, it was we did notice in the fan community and through postings online and stuff, people kind of like, are they going to keep going without Ben and Jess? Are they, is it going to be any good? And I think to a certain extent we were like, what's this going to be like? What do we sound like now? We got, you get so used to functioning within a group, and then there's a structural change to that group. You don't know what it's going to be. So, but I think we were all very early on in the process, very happy and confident that it was gonna work.
That's great. And just speaking as a long-term fan, I think that was my initial reaction too. Was like, oh, it's over with. Like, is this the end? And I was actually very pleased when I saw that Vince is playing guitar now.
Yep.
And Courtney's playing some bass now and then. And I haven't gotten a chance to see you either. This is totally just from watching YouTube videos. And I want to say, Chris, is he covering some guitar too, or some piano?
Chris is doing guitar, keyboard, and violin stuff.
Okay.
So
it's like multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah. So it's especially with reinterpreting the older material, there's a lot of juggling that has to be done. My job is relatively safe because no one else in the band plays drums. Right. So I was, we weren't trading around there, but like the samples that I have on my electronic pad now, because there would be parts where there would just be like big washy chords that Courtney would hold on keyboard while singing. Well, now Courtney's on bass, so I just trigger those chords individually. Like we're not on like a track or anything, so I'm playing each chord individually, which gives me many more chances to screw the show up. So it was those first few shows for all of us were very, there's a lot more moving parts now. So those early shows as the 4-piece were really like, it's a juggling act.
Now, was there any discussion about adding new members, or was it always like, we're going to keep it the core of this group?
I think there was some thought about like, well, what if we have like a live guitarist or something like that? But I think, bands definitely they become ecosystems,
sure.
and to bring other people into that little roaming ecosystem when we've been touring for, so many years together, and we know each other's rhythms, and when to give someone a little more space, and when someone might need to be alone, just kind of the dealing with the rigors of traveling like that. I think bringing in an entirely new person would be rough. And also from a creative standpoint, like for the writing, we're all multi-instrumentalists anyway, and we brought a lot of friends in to kind of once we had songs kind of set up, we brought a lot of friends in to contribute things to it. My brother plays bass on one of the songs, and we tracked a double drum kind of arrangement of Forest, the opening track. But that I don't think those tracks didn't get used on the album.
The box set. One for the box set. Now, exactly. has there been a lot of outtakes like that or curiosities that have popped up through your career?
We've never been, and especially as like I'm someone who really loves listening to bands' B-sides and outtakes and demos. And shockingly, Bent Knee has very little of any of those things. I mean, we have, like, there are a few kind of like, early demo kind of internal, like, hey, we're working out this idea, track it on a phone in a rehearsal room, or like, when we're pitching ideas to each other, early versions that one or two people may have just kind of worked up on the laptop. But in terms of like entire completed songs that we finished and then just kind of went, no, this isn't going to be on the album, we don't have anything like that.
It's like Rush were like that.
Yeah.
They used everything. Yeah.
I can, let's see, there was a song that was in development for You Know What They Mean that I want to say the working title was Pollinate, and it was pretty much just a bass line and a drum groove that never quite got settled on, but that fairly early on we kind of were like, that this isn't working as well as all this other stuff is working, so we're gonna go with the stuff that's working.
Yeah, that's interesting because you as much as I love like going through the Jethro Tull catalog and something like the Broadsword and the Beast album, for instance, which has a million of outtakes on it, you have to think like at some point, wow, it has to be demoralizing to work on something and get it to that point and then go, nah.
Yeah, that's it has to be.
Right. Yeah, it's like, nah. Like I feel like whenever I make an album, like I put everything into a track and I want to include it.
Yeah.
Like, so I respect that. Now, if I recall, a lot of the writing from you guys was democratic, like actually sitting in a room and working on stuff.
Yeah.
And I think Frosting was the first time that it was like, oh, one person brings this song to the band and then you work on it. Like, because that was a pandemic album, right?
True. Well, so it had been kind of the first album was Courtney and Ben wrote all the songs and then kind of brought people in.
Right.
But like Shiny Eyed Babies, Say So, Land Animal, and You Know What They Mean, were varying degrees of Ben or Courtney or Jessica might bring in like a verse and a chorus that they had developed, or in some cases, like Battle Creek, Ben had been performing acoustically, I think, as part of like acoustic sets that he was doing solo. So people would bring things in and we would all work on it, as a group and flesh it out. And like, if you were to listen to the two, like the verse and chorus that came in and then the finished album version, they're, vastly different. but frosting definitely was different than all of those because it was the pandemic and we were all kind of spread out across the world really because Chris spent a lot of lockdown in Cyprus. And we were working on different things and so Frosting is probably the Bentley album that I know the least because there were some songs that I had very little to do with in terms of like actual or like acoustic drums being put on them and stuff like that. So it was a much different process making Frosting than all the other ones.
So this is a return more to the older style of working, like everybody's in the room together, somebody brings an idea, and then you flesh it out.
Yeah, we got together, the four of us, to just kind of do some exploratory, just kind of see what's there, right? And we got together at a house. And each had, like, I had my drum trigger pad, I had a guitar and some keyboard. We all just had various instruments, and we were more just kind of finding sounds and finding interesting, loops and things like that for us to play with. And then we went into a studio and played against what we had done and came up with new ideas in the studio. Like, for instance, the song Drowning on 20 Pills. We were in a studio. We were in Big Nice Studio in Rhode Island. And we were just standing around. I was on drums, Courtney was on bass, Vince and Chris had guitars. And Courtney said, what if we did something in 6/8? And I just did the most obvious doom, and just kind of to be funny, like 6/8, here's, a very obvious 6/8. And then this beautiful song came out over the top of it. And, so this was a very, and then once we got loops and sections and stuff like that, people would take things and kind of write vocal melodies and lyrics and stuff over the top. But yeah, a lot of all the seeds for the songs were created, all four of us together.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it does show in the work because there was something as soon as I put this one on that it took me back to the first time I heard Bent Knee, which was Shiny Eyed Babies. Like that's what it reminded me a lot of. One of the things I was really curious about, you were talking about using the studio almost as a tool within the process. I am very impressed by your drum sounds across this record, and to me it sounds even better captured than perhaps in the past. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit because you started telling me a little bit about over Messenger about that process, but I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like most of that credit has to go to Vince.
Sure.
For his production. But the drums were recorded. Some of the drums were tracked at Big Nice Studio in Rhode Island, which the live room is huge and drums sound wonderfully massive in that room. And I was using it in both studios really in Rhode Island, and then we recorded some other drums in Oakland, California at Tiny Telephone Studio, which also has an amazingly gorgeous live room where drums sound massive, and both studios have excellent in-house drums as well. I'm a big believer as a drummer of using drums that live in a studio, because oftentimes they are kind of tuned and fixed up to sound good in that room. And they often can pull incredible sounds out of the room, as well as, so long as the drums are of a quality, it could just sound great. but yeah, so it's a combination of those two excellent studios, and then Vince with his, the way that he produces things, just gets massive drum sounds. I'm very happy with the drums on this record.
I think I texted Mike Lieto and I said Gavin's Maroda is showing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's almost what it took me back to, was like Peter Gabriel 4, where the drums they're almost the lead instrument as much as Peter's voice is, and that's what I hear. But to me, it's also part of what I'm talking about the distillation of bent knee down to its core elements, because it does feel like the drums are more up front because there's less things in the mix that are competing with those frequencies. So it really seems to drive them. And there was another tune that I mentioned in my notes, and that's Never Coming Home. Mm-hmm. And the kind of disco dance backbeat that you have in that is so cool. And I mean, outside of something like Cradle of Rocks off of You Know What They Mean, I'm not used to hearing you play like in that dancey style.
Yeah, well, so Never Coming Home started, like, the initial kind of groove track for that. It had the working title Princey Prance because I was going for kind of a Prince vibe.
Oh,
I missed the Prince thing entirely, but and especially once Courtney added the vocal melody and the lyrics, and the song became eventually what it became. It turned into something, I think, really, really beautiful. And drum wise, that's my homage to Chris France of Talking Heads.
Oh, okay.
If you listen to some of the fills, it's very, some of them I stole directly from Chris France.
Okay.
So it's my ode to him. And that the rhythm section on that's the song that my brother played bass on.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
that's my brother and I, who have always had, because we have such, we grew up with very similar, well, musical and actual DNA. But
the other kind.
Exactly. I think he and I always have kind of a good connection when we play together. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool track, and it's one that grabbed me right from the start as being very non-traditionally bent knee, but at the same time, it couldn't be anybody else. Like it has that quality to it. And along those lines, the track DLWTSB, that song almost sounds to me like it's two related songs that are plugged together, but what glues them together is your shifting drum pattern in the middle of that. And that impressed me so much. Like, even when I was listening to it earlier today, the way you kind of turn around that beat, and I don't know if I'm even using the right words here, but it's really cool.
Thank you. If I remember the recording of that correctly, because, well, at the end of the day, I think it was a few takes kind of mashed on top of each other, if I remember right. But that was something that we tried in the studio, and I never could get quite right. Mm-hmm. But through the kind of the stumbling around and me trying to do it, Vince was able to put together something that sounded really cool.
Yep.
And got it where it needed to go.
That's interesting. Yeah, because when I was listening to it, I could tell that the drum sound had shifted a little bit in that second half, and it was toward like a more like a drum loop, or like a drum machine type sound. And I was like, I wonder how they pulled that off. That's a cool effect.
Well, there's some instances where Vince will use the recordings that I did to trigger sounds. So using like the transients of the audio. So like every time I hit a snare, he is able to trigger like a different sound. So I think some of that is is kind of layering of samples and stuff over what I'm doing and mixed into what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool track. And then there was one other song that I wanted to talk about, because when I listened to this record for the first time, I knew that you had to have something to do with the Cowboy song.
Yes.
Because and then I read about it later from the Bentley Facebook page. But my first impression was, immediately my mind went to Homer Flynn and the Residents. And that surprised me to hear that influence coming through this album. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Gavin's a big Residents fan. Okay, now that makes sense. And then to hear it kind of devolve into this industrial kind of David Lynchian, Mulholland Drive Cowboy setting, that's a really interesting track. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came together?
Yeah. I mean, that started as when we were just in the studio, just kind of exploring and finding things. In between, we were on a break or something, but I just had a guitar in my hands and I was messing around, just strumming, and I started just singing this little thing about a cowboy being scared. and we all laughed, and someone said, we ought to record that. Just, offhand, like we have, there are lots of little things that just kind of wind up getting recorded in these sessions. And it wasn't until we heard the first kind of perspective mix of the album from Vince that any of us knew that song would actually be on the album. There was talk about like, oh, this would be a fun like April Fool's single to put out or something like that. Yeah. But I think Vince found a way to use it on the album that's a nice kind of palate cleanser between the two songs that it lives between.
Yeah.
And found a way to use it effectively and interestingly, and yeah. We actually on the most recent tour, on the half of it that I was able to be on, we performed it exactly one time at the first show in New York, and that was fun. I just kind of played it. It didn't necessarily have that melting aspect to it, but just kind of played it. Ended up not because it didn't work, but just for other reasons. It didn't make it through the rest of the tour, but it was fun to play it live that one night.
Yeah, and I think if we were, because this record did come out on vinyl, I think that would be placed right at the end of side one.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice little interlude there. Now, speaking of early singles, I did listen to the Lawnmower track when that came out on Bandcamp, and I didn't connect with it, but for some reason in the context of the album I did, and I think it might have something to do with the fact that I grew up in the country, and like I just moved out of the country, so hearing it back, it was like, oh, this is really affecting to me. But I don't remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember the kind of Counselor-esque ending with the heavy guitars. Was that something that was added into the album version, or?
No, the Bandcamp version has the kind of the big rock ending too.
Okay.
The album version is a lot different. There's a lot, there's different layers and different, it is a different version, so there are a lot of differences. But the structure of the song, in terms of the kind of the dynamic arc of it, is still the same. And our buddy Pete Danilchuk did some excellent synth stuff at the end of that song with nice drony synths over the end.
Yeah, that's a track. Now that I've had a chance to hear the whole record and see how it fits in, it's now a highlight for me for whatever reason. And whenever I hear that Counselor thing, it takes me back to talking with Ben Levin about it. And when you guys were I think doing Say So, and he said, oh yeah, that was our nod to Cardiacs and Dirty Boy.
Yeah. That sounds right. I'm struggling to remember that conversation, but that sounds right, because I do know that I snuck in a sort of Cardiac's inspired event into oh boy, it's on Shiny Eyed Babies. Oh, come
Sunshine?
on! No, it's center of attention. Why am I blanking on the name of that song? People watching this on YouTube are screaming at both of us.
Yeah, 'cause I can remember it. I'm looking it up.
In God We Trust.
In God We Trust, yeah.
In God We Trust. Jeez, wow. I can't believe I forgot that. But over that looping vocal part at the end, the center of attention, da, 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 the bass and drums are doing a pattern that doesn't quite line up with it. Exactly like how at the end of Hope Day, right? Tim is doing the passive actions leave no traces, da 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 da, and the bass and drums are doing that, bump 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 bump, that doesn't quite line up, so it kind of like undulates under what's going on. So that's a Cardiac's reference that made it in. Counselor sounds correct also.
Yeah, that I mean, this is going back like 10 years now. So, but I just remember having a conversation with Ben Levin where he said, "Oh yeah, I'm not the biggest Cardiac's fan, but Gavin showed us Dirty Boy."
Yeah.
One time, and that inspired that whole that one section of that song. So, talking about influences, like. And when I say that this is what I hear, I'm sure that reflects more what I listen to. That's what I bring to it. But I was kind of surprised to hear what I thought was like a Beatles influence on some of the tracks. Some of those strings coming in kind of made me think of Sgt. Pepper album, or even like going forward a few decades, like Radiohead. I heard some stuff that kind of made me think of them. I was wondering, what are the band listening to these days?
I think, it's kind of hard to pinpoint things that all four of us all agree on musically.
Sure.
We all have, Radiohead is a band that we all like, even though everyone says that I don't like Radiohead. I do like Radiohead. I just like the first two albums. That's an oversimplification. I like OK Computer and everything else as well. If I'm putting on a Radiohead album, it's the Bends. Yeah, like it's hard to think of things that all four of us all kind of are super passionate about musically, band wise, or like bands that we listen to, obviously I come at things from the sort of, Peter Gabriel, Cardiac's, Crimson, Zappa, all that stuff that I grew up listening to. And the string stuff was Chris and Courtney wrote, I believe, all those string lines. And it's just fun to have, string quartets on things, like
it is. Yeah.
I'm willing to bet Skylarking had something to do with that too, by XTC.
Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I know that's an album that at least Vince and I both like a lot.
Great. I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Like 1,000 Umbrellas. I could definitely some of those, like the slides into one chord from one chord into the next. Maybe Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding got that from the Beatles too.
Oh,
and that's what I'm.
Bet, yeah.
That's the connection I'm making. But that's cool. I'm glad that you guys are into that record. That's one of my favorites.
That's a great one. My personal favorite XTC is probably either Black Sea or Drums and Wires.
Yeah.
I tend to be much more into neurotic, jangly things. I mean, I love, I love Skylarking, and Oranges and Lemons is another. I mean, I love that album too. But like the ones I go back to the most are Black Sea and Drums and Wires.
Sure, me too. And even some of the early stuff, like I think This Is Pop is
tremendous.
Just
song.
a fantastic piece of music.
Yeah, tremendous. With Barry Andrews still on keyboards for that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think we've probably satisfied the bent knee portion of my questions. So I don't know if we want to allow ourselves to go off the deep end with stuff here, or
I'm down. I'm down.
What have you been listening to lately?
I got really into this band called Chat Pile. They're a recent band. They're out of I believe it's Kansas City. But they're kind of like, man, it's like if Pear Ubu, the Jesus Lizard, and the Birthday Party all kind of fell into a blender and then watched a bunch of 80s horror films.
Interesting.
Yeah, just this really just wonderfully heavy but also there's a they can be beautiful and terrifying and intensely touching, but also disturbing. It's some amazing stuff. They put out they have one full-length album out so far. Their next one comes out next month. But God's Country is the name of the album.
I'll check that out. That at least sounds interesting.
Yeah, they're real good. I'm going to be seeing them in a couple of months here. So I'm excited for that. But other than that, been re-listening to a lot of 80s Crimson for in prep for that Beat show. I'm excited to see that. Wish they were playing The Howler, but they're,
Yeah, The Howler's a great track. We just did, Mike and I just did, and I wish we would have thought to invite you in on this, because we did a discussion on the entire Crimson catalog.
Nice.
And it was one of those things where we got together and thought, we'll talk for an hour, and no, it ended up being like 3.5 hours.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I've cut it up, and I've been just kind of trickling it out a little bit every week. But yeah, we did the 80s albums, and I've got the box. That is one of my favorite things, because you can put in an album Blu-ray and hear, like, say you put in the Beat album. You can hear the Beat album, and then you can go see them play in France, the 1982 Frégis show. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But then there's videos, there's other shows, there's demos, there's all kinds of stuff. It's like a box set on a disc for every album.
Oh, that's so cool.
But yeah, I really fell in love with that stuff before, but like, this is spoilers for our ranking, but Discipline is my favorite all-time King Crimson album.
That's the correct choice, in my opinion. It's mine too. Yeah.
It's one of those albums that it sounds like it could have been recorded tomorrow. I think the fact that this band is going out and playing this music, and it's as successful as it is kind of proof of that it hasn't aged. But you'll have to let me know what you think when you get a chance to see them, because I won't be able to, at least not this tour.
Yeah, I do wonder what the future of this band would be. Like, if because honestly, those are four people that I would like to see what they would come up with.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And then you have two Zappa alumni. So like, what it is the next one is it a Zappa tour? Are we going to get to hear Tony Levin interpret Zappa stuff on a Chapman stick?
Pygmy Twilight.
Oh yeah,
some of those wow, that would work.
Beautiful Chapman stick version of Sofa.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That would be fun. Yeah. Or like ABC or A by C, however it's pronounced. But no, I'm definitely excited for that. Been re-listening to a lot of that stuff. Zappa too, always he's always a favorite. I find myself going back to a lot of the Halloween box sets just for like fun time listening. The Halloween was at 81.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Yeah.
81's a good one. Blue Light is a song that continually wins me over as like, why wasn't this one talked about more in his catalog? That and Pick Me, I'm Clean. Like
two Tinseltown Rebellion tracks. I've been meaning to dig that out, but I just thought of a Zappa oddity that I've been exploring a little bit, and that's Francesco Zappa.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And this album fascinates me because it on the surface it appears that Frank is revitalizing this composer who's a ancestor of his. But the more that you look into it and you read the liner notes, the more it starts sounding like Reuben and the Jets to me.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I wonder if Francesco Zappa was Frank's attempt at doing a Mozart parody, like saying, "Oh, I can do this too," but he created all this lore around it because that just seems like something he would do.
I need to, I've heard that album, but only once years ago. I need to check that one out again.
It's not like, I don't think it's like a hidden gem or anything like that. Yeah. It's just the rare Zappa album that I can put on and just kind of relax to. I don't have to think that much about it. Yeah. And it's just kind of, it's pleasant. And I think that makes it stand out from a lot of the other albums, even his classical or synclavier works. They're usually very scary. I mean, Dance Me This is its own flavor. Like it's kind of like, I don't want to say hypnotic, but that's almost, almost the word I'm looking for. Like it's very serene.
Yeah.
Which is different for him. But now we'll be doing the Apostrophe discussion. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm in fact later today I haven't had time as much lately to dig into that box set, but I'm between now and this weekend. That's my mission.
Great. I do really enjoy these Zappa sets.
Oh yeah.
That have been coming out. The way that Frank worked endlessly fascinates me.
Oh yeah. It's so unlike any other artist. So unlike any other artist, and the fact that you can hear things like for instance, we mentioned Tinseltown Rebellion a little bit earlier, and that album is a very interesting one for me because it's an album that I love most of the songs on it, but all of my favorite versions of the songs on that album are not on Tinseltown Rebellion. Like I think. Yeah, because it's everything got overdeveloped. Like if I'm gonna listen to Easy Meat, I'm listening to an earlier live version without the big, yan da da dan dan da da dan, without that breakdown. If I'm listening to For the Young Sophisticate, it's the leather version,
which is Overnight Sensation outtake, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's from the Overnight Sensation sessions because it's on the box.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Because I think Ricky Lancelotti shows up. Would you still love me if my hair grew?
Yeah. So good.
Gavin, I want to thank you for taking your time and joining me today. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
20 Pills Without Water is available now. Enjoy it. You can either buy it physically or listen to it ethereally. Have fun.
Are there any future plans for the band right now?
No plans yet. I think we're still just kind of writing this album out and kind of, it was a long process making this album. So yeah, there are no plans as of yet.
Cool.
The tour just concluded last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. I don't know. My sense of time is, as I've been down with a bad back, so I'm kind of like,
right.
Days just kind of blend together.
Time doesn't exist. I know how that can be.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you again so much. And for the listeners at home, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because Gavin will be joining us very soon for a discussion on the Frank Zappa Apostrophe box set. So you won't want to miss it. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.